This is My First Job in Sports web series, presented by SBR.net, your comprehensive source of sports data to the academic community. Here are the hosts of My First Job in Sports, Neil Schwartz and Mark Sullivan.
Hi, I'm Neil Schwartz, host of My First Job in Sports web series, presented by SBR.net. I'm joined today by my co-host, partner, friend, colleague, and Syracuse alum, Mark Sullivan. Mark, how are you today?
Neil, I'm doing good, and I just want everyone out there to know that this is a safe space for Syracuse alums and non-alums. Everyone's welcome here.
Mark, tell us a little bit about the My First Job in Sports web series.
So the idea is to interview people who are out there working in the field and talk to them about how they got their start in the business. And the idea is to provide to all our listeners kind of a guide, a roadmap, if you will, about how to get started and how to climb the ladder. So the goal, in 2 words, I guess, a little education and a little inspiration.
Well, Mark, you hit that one out of the park, and just to steal a line from our friends over at ABC, we're going to try to span the globe to bring our viewers the variety of sports jobs that are available, because there really are a number of different positions and there are a number of different ways to get there. So, Mark, without any more delay, why don't we get to our first guest?
Well, we are happy to have with us today Nick Holmes. I've known Nick for a little bit, and he is the manager of run specialty sales at Under Armour. Under Armour, certainly one of the glamorous names in the business. So, Nick, thanks for being with us today. Welcome to the show.
Hey, thank you, guys. Nice to be on. Appreciate you having me.
So, tell us, Nick, I know a little bit about your background. I know you were a runner in college. Talk to us about your college experience and how that sort of segued into your first job.
Yeah, so started out at University of Iowa running cross country, track and field, and I love it. I had a great experience there. I wouldn't trade it for anything in the world. I was blessed with some awesome teammates. Obviously, where you make your best friends for life. So I wouldn't trade that experience. I had an amazing coach. My running experience maybe wasn't what I wanted it to be, because I was always injured throughout my career at the university. If you look at my span of 5 years, I think I was hurt on and off for almost 4 out of the 5 years, which is unfortunate. But, it teaches you to work hard and work through it and perseverance, and you have to do that. But, one of the things I would say is that my coach told me when he recruited me that, he was going to be a life coach, and he'd take me from a boy and turn me into a man. That's what he told my parents, right?
Wow.
When he came and sat down.
Powerful.
It was very powerful. And Larry Wazorek is his name, but I owe a lot to him, and I think he did a good job of that. But we'll ask my wife, right? But so I had a great experience there, and was always in love with running and everything to do with running and sports, and was fortunate enough to be able to get a job working in run specialty throughout my time at the end of the University of Iowa there, and just continue to do that. Worked there and then transitioned into working into Chicago. I kind of took a job over with Naperville Running Company with those guys. So that was my first real, I shouldn't say it was my first job in the industry, but that was one of them. I actually started in high school under Adam White at Running Central, for those of you that know the run specialty space. So I started around 16 years old. So I tell people I've actually been doing this a long time, even though I'm only 30. So, yeah.
Well, you got to work for sort of 2 great mentors and 2 individuals who are great at what they do. For the people who live in the Midwest, Adam White at Run Central runs one of the best stores in the country. And then Chris Hartner at Naperville Running. I think he's widely regarded as, a guru in the business. And every year in and out, he's got one of the best stores in the country. So talk a little bit about what you did at Naperville. What did your job consist of?
Yeah, no, agree with you on both of those statements. Those 2 are just awesome humans, and I've learned so much from both of them, whether it be work or just personal life. I can't explain for both of those, and they both have different personalities, right? But one of the things I like to do is the more people you meet, right? Like, I like to try to take something from them, right? And you learn from them. And Adam is so passionate and so smart about the business, and Chris as well, and just what they do. So I've tried to take that and use that in my daily life as well. But working for Chris was great. I learned a lot for him. I started out, Chris, even though I was working in the industry for a while, Chris wasn't, I was a manager at my store in Iowa, he was not going to just have me come in and be a manager there, right? And you have to work your way up. So he had me start back from the bottom and start as a sales floor employee. And which, I shouldn't say that's the bottom, because that's the best interactions, right? You actually get the most interaction with customers and all that good stuff. But he had me start there, and I worked my way up from that to kind of the product tech guru in the store, right? I was always a run shoe geek and loved all the stuff I could learn about it, loved talking to the sales reps, all that stuff. And then worked my way up to being one of the managers of the store. So
You were probably able to parlay your experience as an athlete, super knowledgeable about shoes and footwear, and then take that into translate that, I guess, for your customers.
yeah, for sure, for sure. Neil, go ahead before I think you had something to say too.
When you were in college and you were running cross country and your coach, you said he was going to make you a man and all of that sort of thing. Did you think somewhere in the back of your mind that sports was going to be your future vocation and what you wanted to do? Or was it just did it happen kind of by coincidence?
Yeah, it's a great question. Honestly, I didn't really know. I remember working when I was 16 for Adam, and I thought to myself, I really love this job. And I saw the reps come in with their shoes and their bag, and I'm like, man, I want to do that for a brand. And at the time, I love Steve Prefontaine. He was a legend, right, back in the day. And I idolized that. So Nike was the company that I idolized, right? And so I always wanted to work for a bigger brand, not to knock anything against any smaller brand and what they do, because everyone brings something to the table. But I always wanted to be part of a global brand and a global sports brand. And, so I'm very fortunate to be where I'm at with Under Armour now. But yeah, I didn't know. I liked working in run specialty. I was like, man, it'd be really cool to own a run store someday. And then the more I got into run specialty, I'm like, man, that's a lot. These guys, they got a lot to deal with and a lot of headaches, right? And I give them all the props in the world for, small business. It's incredible what they do. So I thought maybe, I don't know, that's the route I want to go. I want to be on the sales side. I want to be a rep. And then it just kind of worked out this way. But when I was in college, I say that my coach says, make you a man. And I don't mean that in like the terms of manly man or anything like that. It's more so, yeah, you get what I'm saying. It's more so like a better human and all of that stuff. And so I was really into psychology and really into counseling. And I thought that might be the way I went. And it just turned out I just couldn't get out of a run store. So that's what happened. Yeah.
Yeah. So you worked for Naperville for how many years?
I worked for there about 3 years. And when I started with Chris, is kind of when I told him I was coming to Chicago and got the opportunity to interview with him. I told him, hey, I'm going to work my butt off and I'm going to work as hard for you every day as possible. I know you're one of the leaders in the industry and I need your help because I want to be a sales rep. That's my goal. My goal is not to be here long term. I was very upfront and honest about that. And I'm always honest in everything I do. And whether that be good news or bad news, right? I always think it's better to just come out and say it. So I told him that and was like, hey, you help me and I'll help you and I'll give you everything I have and every ounce of energy, right? And that's what I did for about 3 years. So
wow, I didn't realize that. That's a great story.
Yeah.
Talk about making the transition from working in a running specialty store to a big brand like Under Armour.
Yeah, so there was an in-between transition actually. So a couple things. I went from there to being a sales rep. My wife actually used to work for N-Gear Representation. It's like a independent agency, right? And they're contracted through different brands. So she worked for Hoka, who employed this agency, right? And then Hoka kind of took their sales reps in-house, and my wife decided to go with Hoka's route. So that left that agency open, right? And Under Armour, we have a contracted agency model instead of internal sales reps. So I was actually able to jump from being on the floor working with Chris, manager, to jump over to be a sales rep for about a year. So I was an external sales rep for UA for a while. I also covered some other brands in there, CEP and some nutrition brands like Cliff Bar. So got a lot of experience with all that. And then this job opened up, to apply. And I talked to the former sales manager and he said, yeah, I think you should put your name in there. And I just thought it was an incredible opportunity. I jumped at it, right? But it's definitely a big difference. Working the floor and working at a store is a lot different than being a manager and managing people. I guess I managed people in my past, but I think it's different when you're internal at a big corporation. There's
Sure.
definitely more. I wouldn't say more responsibility, but more pressure, I think, to perform. You have numbers to hit, and but at the end of the day, I think I was always taught, like, if you do the right things, right, and you just go out and you work hard and you do the right things and you pay attention, everything else is going to take care of itself, right? So you just have to do it the right way, and that's what I've tried to do since I've been here.
So, talk to us a little bit about, a lot of people listening to this or watching may not know what an independent rep does. So maybe talk about that, and then talk about what you do in your current job as a sales manager, because I think knowing you as I do, it's a nice blend, I think, of customer interaction, but also overseeing, a team of independent reps.
Yeah, for sure. So, I think on the independent side, it is, it's not very different from being an internal sales rep per se, right? Like, it's still the same type of job. It's just, technically you're not supposed to be told exactly what to do from the corporation, right? But you still do. And I was just on the road a lot. You're interacting with customers a lot. Grinding, and especially with Under Armour, as my wife could say with Hoka back when she was doing that, you're there every second trying to build a brand and run, right? Under Armour is a big brand, but it's not big in the run space yet. So it's just trying to build that brand. So it was just out there driving a lot of territory. I covered 5 states. So it was driving around 4 or 5 states, sometimes 8 to 10 hours in a day, right? And you just do that a lot. But also at the same time, you get to build your own schedule and you get to manage your time as you see fit, right? But you're definitely more up to the will of the customer, I would say, right? Which is your account, and whatever they need, you're kind of on their beck and call to do that. Whereas, internally now managing people, it's manage the agencies and helping them manage those expectations, right? Jumping in on the hard conversations with accounts, and it like you said, it is a balancing act of I do still get to see the customers and the accounts with our agencies, but it's also just making sure we're on track to hit our targets, making sure we're hitting our sales goals, making sure we're doing what our goals are that we set out for the season, right? And that might be, hey, our goal is that we need to land more apparel this season, or we need to land more footwear, or these styles, or whatever that is that we determine before the season. That's kind of my job, right?
Nick, tell us about some of the things that you learned early on in your career that you've been able to carry through now with Under Armour.
Yeah, I think definitely perseverance and definitely problem solving. I think that, and willing to think outside the box. You have to do all those things, right? And when I was younger, I say this, I go back to the 16-year-old story. Adam, he's aggressive, right? And he's passionate, and he believes in everybody. But when I was 16, like I didn't know if I had any business fitting sports bras in a store, right? And back in 2006, I mean, moving comfort wasn't as big of a thing, and sports bras were bigger and not as attractive on body and whatnot for the female. And it just was awkward as a 16-year-old male having to jump in and talk about that, right? We also had Trigger Point, which was kind of this hands-on massage therapy type tool, right? And at the time, that was so new in run specialty. So both of those things, I'll say, just got me way out of my comfort zone, because here I am, this shy teenager, right? And at the time, I was very shy. I had glasses and braces and everything you can imagine, and 110 pounds soaking wet. So here I am trying to fit sports bras and help females out, and then also trying to help all our customers out with massage therapy. And it's just very awkward because you're 16 and they're like, who is this kid, right? Like, you think you know something, blah, blah, blah. But you just have to break through and have that confidence and show that, like, hey, I did my work and I know what I'm talking about, right? And I'm confident. And worst case scenario, you get rejected. And I think for young people, that's really hard to take rejection. And it's still hard for me on a daily basis, but you have to be willing to put yourself out there. And that's what I've learned. And also problem solving, like I said. I mean, at Under Armour, everyone thinks, hey, it's this massive company. You have 35 people working for you at any given time. And that's just not the case. So there's always something coming up. And it's every day. I'm like, half my job, I feel like, is problem solving, right? But that's a big part of it. And you have to be able to get creative and come up with another solution. And I say, how do you get somebody to say yes when their answer is no? And you guys probably know that, right?
You bet.
That's tough to do. So it's always coming up with a different way to phrase it, a different way to ask the question, to maybe get that yes to help out. So
Nick, I want to move back a little bit because you talked a little bit about facing rejection and dealing with no, and really all of those things that are negative that younger kids sometimes aren't used to hearing. Tell us a little bit about some of the techniques that you've learned to use, because remember, we are focused on helping students get into the job world and how and the things that they need to know. So how do they learn to overcome those negative things or the no's, just like you said?
yeah, I think it's just a mix of things, right? Like I think no doesn't always mean no, is one thing. So you kind of have to have that internal, no, there's always a voice I say inside my head that kind of drives me, and I lean into my faith a little bit there. Everyone's got what works for them, right? But for me, that's always like the driving ticking tool, and it's like, hey, I don't know that this is quite a real no. So like, let's find another way to get it, right? And then you move on. But sometimes it is a real one, and you have to face that and figure out something else, right? So I think you just have to know that there's something else out there. Like, this is not the end of the road, right? And if this is a no, then I just wasn't supposed to do it, right? And I think nowadays, like, young people are not comfortable being uncomfortable.
Wow.
And I love being uncomfortable. I love it. I live in it, right? And I did that, like, racing and, competing and being competitive. Like, I love that. I couldn't wait to get to the point in a race where you could see, like, where the other person was going to fold and you just hold on, right? Just a little bit longer. And that's life. And I always say how you run is how you live life. And, for people that don't run, use another analogy, but that's what I always use. And that's it right there, is just be comfortable being uncomfortable. And once you get that, like, that you can hold on through anything and you'll be good. Let's move on to the next thing.
Yeah, so two great points there. And one of the things, myself as somebody who's hired a bunch of people, if I had two candidates that were equal and one of them had a background as an athlete, I always went for the athlete, because my feeling was they knew how to compete, they knew how to win, but more importantly, they knew how to lose, they knew how to bounce back from defeat, which it sounds like you've really figured out how to do that.
Yeah, no, I agree with that. I think athletics definitely teaches people a lot of things, and it's teamwork, it's hard work, but at the end of the day, it also comes into what are you going to do, right? Like, you have to make yourself better and people around you better, and that's what you have to bring into the workplace.
Yeah.
And,
The second thing I wanted to follow up on is the idea of no, and getting people to change their minds, because again, as a salesperson, that's your job, right? Is to get people to change their minds sometimes.
Yeah, definitely. Well, it's I always say it's challenging to do that, but you have to, like, read into the psychology of people, right? And what makes them tick. And that's part of the job in sales and in anything, really. But I love that part. It's, okay, if this person doesn't respond to this way and they like more data examples, then I have to go learn the data, right? And figure out how to present it.
Sure.
And if it's more so emotion, then what drives their emotion? What makes them happy? What makes them tick? And I look into that and say, okay, and then how do I present this in a way that appeals to their emotion, right? And you have to do that and be able to navigate that. And you have to do it on the fly, and you have to do it, sometimes right there and in the moment, and be able to just do that off the cuff. So, yeah.
Nick, that's a great segue into really the next thing I wanted to ask you. And one of the things we love to ask the people that we're talking to is that, what are some of the skills that you have now that maybe you would wish you had acquired earlier in school, or said, you know what, I wish I would have taken those courses while I was in school? What are those kinds of things?
Yeah, I think financial management, to be honest with you, is probably the biggest thing. And not even necessarily from what I actually do on a work perspective, although it does help for sure. But I just think life. I think if you could go back to college and I could have saved some of the money, right, from student loans and all that stuff, I'd be a lot less in debt, right? So, but so many young people, like, I came from a blue collar family, right? And, I have a brother in a wheelchair, and he's been a great inspiration to me, but we didn't have, the ability to go buy anything and get everything we wanted, right? So it was getting into school, it was like, hey, this is on you. right? And you're going to be there, you're going to get your scholarship, but it's kind of like you have to deal with your finances and learn that. But freshman year, I feel like there's no course that you come in and they tell you, hey, the government's going to give you $10,000 a year. You really only need to spend 3 of that. So pocket it and then pay off like a bunch of it when you're done with school, right? I wish I would have known that. Like I said, I think that's huge. But just talking about investing and all of the things that you can do financially, it's just a whole nother world. And I'm still learning that. Like I feel like I'm still so new to it. And it does help me on the business side in my job as well, because, obviously we have to know numbers and sales and all that good stuff. But that's probably the biggest thing I wish I could go back and learn. And then, the other thing when you speak about that is just breaking out of your shell and your comfort zone. I was forced to do that when I was young, but I still probably didn't do it enough. And I wish I would have, and I wish I would have known, like, it's sometimes people are just shy people, and you can't force that out of somebody, but you just have to be willing to put yourself in situations. I wish I would have done that more. So,
that's I think that's great advice on both counts.
Awesome.
Yeah, we hear from a lot of young people sometimes about how they're a little intimidated in a business situation, or they're at a conference and they're standing, by themselves in a corner, and I really try to say to people, look, you gotta, get in there. I know it can be tough, but you got to get in there. Any advice, Nick, on how you can kind of help people kind of let themselves get in there?
Yeah, I think just, be yourself, right? And don't be afraid to be yourself, because everyone's going to accept you. And if they don't, then someone else will. And you move on and find that person, right? Don't be afraid to go introduce yourself and have a handshake and get a card or a number or whatever that may be, if that's what you have to do, right? And sometimes it'll be another situation where you're in a room and you get to have the opportunity to talk to somebody that is maybe running a business or whatever it is that you're passionate about. Don't be afraid to put your hand up and ask the question. I think that's the other thing. Sit in the front and ask the question. I always taught that in school. Sit in the front, right? I always sat in the back because I was coming from practice.
Me too.
You know how it is.
Me too. I was a guy that sat in the back row.
Yeah, for sure. That's another thing. I wish I could go back and sit in the front more and and yeah.
Had I known then what I knew now, I think that would have been. I mean, Mark can tell you. Mark and I have been to a number of conferences together, and you know how there's always one guy who's always ready to ask that first question? That's me.
Yes.
But in college, it was not.
That's awesome. That's awesome that you were able to like transition to that, and have that. That's cool. I'm trying to be like that too, so it's great. I think in school too. I was very bad at caring about classes that I knew that I was not going to use right down the road, or if it wasn't towards my major, but I still had to take it. I was really struggled with that. But you have to do that, and they want to see that in your job too. They want to see like, hey, just because this is not what you're exactly passionate about, like you still have to do it well, and you still have to understand it, and you still have to do this. And you may, at a company, you may be tasked to do something that's outside of your job description. And I would say that 99% of your job is probably going to be outside of your job description, as you guys know. And you learn that very quickly, and you're like, well, this is not the job I signed up for. Well, hey,
Yeah, it's the job you have.
Exactly. A couple things I think are important though for people is, I saw this video years back, and it was probably one of the most powerful videos I saw. It was like Bill Gates was on an interview on TV, right? And somebody was asking him like, how did you become a billionaire, right? And he's like, well, I'll tell you the difference between you and I, and I'll show it to you. And he takes out a blank check. He says, how much do you want? And he's about to write it down. And the lady goes, oh, no, that's okay. I don't need your money, right? And he asks 2 more times. And then I think he goes back and says, she keeps saying no. And he says, that's the difference between you and I. I could have made you a billionaire today. He's like, if somebody gives you something or they are giving you an opportunity and the door opens, you're supposed to take it, right? And so that's something I've learned a lot and have just said like, hey, it comes with that intuition, but when a door opens, you should take that, and don't be afraid to take it. You'll know it's the right thing pretty quickly, and don't be afraid to take it. So
yeah, well, that's great advice from Bill Gates, and great advice from Nick Holmes. So Nick, thanks so much for being on the show today. Really enjoyed talking to you. I feel like I got to know you a little bit in a different way, and I think a lot of what you had to say today will really be extremely valuable to everybody out there looking to start their careers.
Awesome. I appreciate it. Thank you guys both for the time, and hopefully I'll get to see you soon. And Neil, hopefully we'll meet down the road as well.
Nick, I want to thank you for being on My First Job in Sports web series. And I want to thank everyone for tuning in to this episode of My First Job in Sports presented by SBRnet. Check out the video version of SBRnet Video Corner on YouTube. And you can also check us out with the audio version on all major podcast platforms, or head on over to sbrnet.com. I want to thank our producer, Brad Mabey. I want to thank, of course, my co-host, Mark Sullivan. And, of course, I want to thank our guest, Nick Holmes from Under Armour. Thanks, everyone, and we'll see you next time.
Thank you for tuning in to this edition of My First Job in Sports, presented by SBRnet. You can check out the video version on the SBRnet Video Corner on YouTube. You can also catch the audio version on all major podcast platforms. Just search for My First Job in Sports. My First Job in Sports is produced by Brad Mabey. You can connect with us on all social media platforms, including Twitter, Instagram, and LinkedIn, or check us out at sbrnet.com. Thank you for tuning in.